This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We have a fantastic show for you today. Our guest today is Vic Martin. Where did I come up with these nicknames? A U.S. Navy veteran who currently serves as California's American Legion District 22 Commander and the National Director of Community Engagement for Solara Mental Health, a veteran-specific mental health and substance use disorder treatment center. We're going to talk with them about veteran mental health, the barriers to care, what effective treatment can look like, and how we can do better as a community to support and advocate for our fellow veterans and veterinarians and whatever kind of vets that we talk to who listen to us. But first, Adam, you've got something you'd like to discuss before we get started.
That's right, Joe. The National Executive Committee passed Resolution Number 7, American Legion Family Day.
Nice.
They did this at its fall meeting in October of 2022. The resolution established an American Legion Family Day to be observed annually on the last Saturday of April. So this year, for Legion Family Day on April 26, mark your calendars, posts are encouraged to open their doors to members of the community for the day to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of Legionnaires, Sons of the American Legion members, Legion Riders, and American Legion Auxiliary, and to bring awareness to the organization's Be the One initiative to reduce the rate of veteran suicide. So Alphas, if your post is doing something cool for American Legion Family Day this weekend, please let us know, share it on social media, and tag the American Legion when you post, or head over to Legiontown at legiontown.org and share it under the Veterans Strengthening America category. And who knows, if you do something cool like screen a movie at your $4 million theater, then let us know. And if you don't have a $4 million theater, that's okay. There's plenty of cool things that you can do.
I suppose you're giving a shout out to the Hollywood.
That's right.
Hollywood
Posts. They got a cool way to open their doors. If you share an inspiring story of your American Legion Family Day adventures, we may feature it here on a future episode.
Sounds good. Okay, Alpha, stick around. We'll be right back with Vic Martin right after the break.
The American Legion is raising awareness about PTSD and veteran suicide by offering hope, camaraderie, and support.
Be the one to help end veteran suicide.
Be the one to save one veteran.
Be the one to ask a veteran in your life how they're doing.
Be the one to reach out when a veteran is struggling.
Go to BeTheOne.org and help the American Legion end veteran suicide.
Will you be the one?
Hey, Alphas. Today we're joined by Vic Martin, National Director of Community Engagement for Solara Mental Health and California American Legion District 22 Commander. Vic, welcome to Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks so much for opening your studios to allow me.
Nice. Well, of course. Vic, welcome to the show, and thank you for your service. I want to start out by getting to know you a little bit, like where you're from originally. Why the heck did you join the Navy of all the branches to choose? What did you do in the service? And maybe like what's your fondest memory from your time in the Navy?
Absolutely. So I was born in La Mirada, California, here just outside of Los Angeles, and lived in LA until I was probably about 10 or 11 years old, and then moved to the Inland Empire. I lived in Redlands, California, and went to high school there. And then my dad passed away, and I didn't really have any family, and so I decided to move to San Diego and sort of start my life at the ripe age of 18. And so I went back to high school to get my my high school diploma. I had to drop out of school after my dad passed away, and so got a job washing dishes at a natural food store in Del Mar, and started sort of my life. I ended up really doing well at the natural food store, and worked my way up, and then left, and ended up working at a law office. And I worked for 4 different attorneys, practicing 4 different types of law: real property, civil litigation, estate planning, and intellectual property. And worked there for about 10 years, 11 years. Really enjoyed the work, enjoyed the intensity. I sort of talk about it being my college experience. Learned a lot about how to communicate with people. And unfortunately, I realized after about 10 years that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I had 2 choices, and one was to be a paralegal, and the other was to become an attorney. And I didn't feel as though I was smart enough to become an attorney. And working at a law office the size that I did, there really wasn't any sort of retirement program or any sort of nothing set up to really help you with your future. And so my wife is actually a DoD contractor for the Navy, and so she has sort of been in that realm and been in that world. And I had met a few Navy personnel as well. I was 32 years old, I think 31 years old. And I said, this is a shift that I want to make in my life. I want to be able to serve my country. I always feel as though, service is over self. And so I decided to join the Navy. Ended up going to boot camp as one of the oldest guys in the division, and ended up graduating as an honor graduate for boot camp, and then got the A school that I really wanted, which was mineman A school. And so I worked as a mineman, which essentially is an underwater explosives sort of rate, where you work to build, store, classify underwater explosives. And my first duty station was at Naval Weapons Station Seal Beach, where we worked at a mine mobilization unit. So we were a mobile mine detachment that could be sent anywhere in the world to build mines. And so it was really exciting, and I loved the team that I worked with. I learned a lot about camaraderie and teamwork, and not having a family growing up, it was sort of my extended new family. So I loved it. My second duty station was on the USS Chief in San Diego. And I was attached to prior to that, was attached to a Mark V Sea Lion unit, and worked with Navy Sea Lions in a mine warfare capacity. And I would say that, I've gotten a chance to stand under helicopters, and, gotten a chance to fly on carriers and fly off of carriers, and, done amazing things in the Navy. But working with Sea Lions was one of the most gratifying and rewarding things that I ever did. And so I always had concerns about how animals were treated in the military. I'm a big animal lover myself, and I'm an advocate for animals. And so when they told me I would be working with Sea Lions, I was really concerned to kind of see how they were handled and treated. But each Sea Lion had like 2 veterinarians attached to it. It had 2 handlers. I mean, a whole care unit that went with every Sea Lion. And I remember walking by, and they had a chart, and they were counting how many different types of fish that they were feeding that specific Sea Lion a day. And it was, down to, 3 herring, 2 of these, 2 of that, just to ensure that it was getting a really nutritious meal, and being taken care of well. So that was really meaningful work that I did. Then I was attached to the USS Gladiator. As part of Crew Dominant. In the mine warfare world, we are not attached to a hull of a ship, but we are attached to a crew, and the crew swap hulls. So we had a ship in Bahrain, a minesweeper in Bahrain, that one crew was leaving, and Crew Dominant was taking over. And so we flew out there and took over the ship, took over the hull, and that was my first time really being in country, sort of in a war zone. And although we were in the Arabian Gulf, the threats from Iran were really, really, I think, prominent. And, several times a day we had small boats racing at us, working in the Strait of Hormuz where Iran owns both sides, and ensuring that that strait is clear of mines so that those ships can access that waterway, was crucial work, but it came at a risk. And so, unfortunately, while I was there and forward deployed, I got hurt, and I suffered I was unconscious for an extended period of time. The Navy said about 90 minutes, and I was having heart issues during being unconscious, where my heart was slowing to a rate where they were having to give me medications to increase my heart rate, and then that would go too far and then have to reduce it. And so that was going back and forth, back and forth. On a minesweeper, we don't, and especially in Bahrain where we didn't have ambulances or any way to a hospital. I mean, we have a small clinic in Bahrain, but that's about it. And so they had to stick me on a stretcher and put me in a duty van, which was a small little Daihatsu, minivan, up on the tops of the seats, because they couldn't get the seats down, I guess, and take me to a hospital in Manama, Bahrain. But they refused to accept me. And I was still unconscious at this time and don't remember any of this, but I had an amazing master chief who really looked after me and made sure I got off the boat, which the CO didn't want to allow it to happen in the first place. But once we got denied at the first hospital, they drove me about 45 minutes away to the International Hospital of Bahrain, where they did admit me, thank God, and diagnosed me with prinzmetal angina, which is a heart condition that causes spasms in the heart, and they think that it was brought on by environmental conditions. And so that's sort of my experience in the military. I was medevaced back to the States. One of the things that really sucked about my deployment was I was medevaced on my 80th day. And to receive an expeditionary medal, you have to stay in country for 90 days. And so I never received an expeditionary medal. And so I was medevaced back to the States, back to Balboa Naval Hospital. And then over about a 6-month period, started to recover. But one thing that's sort of unique about a brain injury is that all of the onset of sort of the injuries or sort of the symptoms don't necessarily present themselves at the onset of the injury, and sometimes it takes some time for them to actually form. And that was sort of my cognitive issues. Really didn't affect me initially, but over time definitely affected me. I had bad speech issue, speaking impediment after the injury. I had, they had basically diagnosed me, the Navy, with a hypoxic brain injury, meaning that I had a lack of oxygen to the frontal lobe of my brain for an extended period of time. And so it was very challenging transitioning from service to, now I'm a medically retired mineman who my entire crew is still deployed. All my friends are still deployed. And here I am at home with my family feeling extremely guilty and sort of not really understanding how to negotiate a lot of the mental health diagnosis I received. Severe anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, PTSD, and something called panic disorder, which I didn't even know was a thing. And the panic disorder, I think, was the most challenging in me being a father. I was oftentimes trying to get out of the house because my wife was yelling at me, "You need to get out of here. You can't stay in the house all day." Because I had really lost my purpose and had no direction. And having 3 kids at the time was really challenging.
Well, that's probably a really good spot to interject.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because it's such a powerful story of service, and thank you for laying the foundation of that and really kind of understanding what the circumstances were for your injury. And you really started to hit on kind of the next question that I had, which is around transitioning out of service, especially through medical retirement. Similarly, just to kind of mirror and reflect a little bit, my older brother was a Special Forces Green Beret in first group, medically retired in 2013 for his TBI and PTSD. because he was the breacher on his special forces team. So very, very similar, just like in a different part of the battlefield, having to be in around concussive blast wave after concussive blast wave as a part of your job requirement, right? Like, we're not even talking about in combat or sweeping actual mines, just the train up for that. What we know about the brain is that every exposure, even in like a concussive blast wave, can actually have almost like 1,000 mild traumatic brain injuries where the outer shell of the brain is rippling across the hard outer shell of the skull. And each one of those can cause shearing of the neurons, chemical leakage into the brain, an imbalance in hormone production, swelling, inflammation. So now you have hormones out of balance, you have swelling in the brain, and our protocols in the military and within the VA and the DoD, they're not able to assess or test for these things. And so we've learned this, and we've been able to start creating programs and protocols to map that. But you're talking about, like, we're on the forefront of learning so much right now, specifically in the last 10 to 15 years, about the brain, about these advanced diagnostics. But then the other side of that is, we're trying to map them back into the system that exists, the pathways of care, to be able to get folks the care they need. And in between there, where we don't have that, then you're left to transition and use what's available, try and make sense of it. So in your journey and in your work with veterans, like, what do you started to kind of list some, but what do you see as the biggest challenge in finding purpose after service, as you're trying to navigate returning to whole health, but then also, like, where do I fit in now that I'm no longer mineman? How do these misconceptions about veteran mental health make that process even harder from your perspective?
Well, I think when you sort of talk about mental health and you talk about transition out of the military into civilian life, you sort of have to go further back into the DoD world and on the other side of the fence. We can't expect that someone's going to come out of the gate and then all of a sudden have all the avenues and resources available to seek the help that they need. Nor can we really rely on the VA. I mean, the VA is three departments: healthcare, benefits, and burial. None of that is transition. None of that has to do with helping veterans become veterans. It really comes down to the veteran. So when we start to look upstream on the other side or inside of the fence at DoD, I sort of look at there's been a lot of money invested in trying to change the TAPS program. Which is the transition assistance program that the Navy currently has, which essentially is slideshows or a few speakers from some banks. I was transitioning out, like I said, with a brain injury and all these new health diagnoses. And here I am finding myself at a TAPS session, and I can't understand what the man is saying. I can't understand the words that are coming out of his mouth, but I was required to go to that, and that was supposed to be my transition program. So, I think when you especially talk about medically retired, or even those who are being discharged for mental health diagnosis, who may not be getting medically retired, I think both those demographics really are at-risk demographics that need to be addressed. Oftentimes, the DoD has an opportunity to address and recognize and identify those people through the MedSep and med evaluation process. And so as those veterans are being identified, my hope is that they would be able to go into specific programs to help them and guide them out of the DoD world and into the civilian world with the resources and tools they needed. One program that I've heard of that I really like is a program called Onward Ops, and it allows for civilians to be trained by the VA to be transition coordinators, and they are matched up with active duty service members prior to them getting out of the military. And so 6 months prior now, this guy is going to Philadelphia from San Diego, and he has a sponsor, a civilian in Philadelphia, who's sort of guiding him on, hey, these are good places to live, and these are good grocery stores to go to, and here's your Whole Foods and so forth. And so I think that I think those sort of changes are going to be really helpful. In my case, it led me to suicide before I found my purpose. You know, I struggled. I saw the pain that I was giving my family and putting on my family. I saw the challenges that my daughters were facing with a father who was screaming and running through parking lots and hiding in bushes. I saw the pain of my daughter watching me at Home Depot have essentially a complete breakdown where I was vomiting, urinating, shaking in a corner, and my 8-year-old daughter is watching me. Those sort of incidences left me not wanting, number one, to leave the house, wanting to isolate, and number two, realizing that maybe if I wasn't here, although it'd be really hard for my family to sort of process initially, maybe their lives would be better without me. And I think a lot of times that's where veterans find themselves. And it is something that is shameful, something you don't want to talk to people about, but it is life and death. And I will be honest, I got out and my attempt was probably about 9 months after I got out. And in that 9 months, I didn't think anybody cared. But in fact, here in San Diego, we have over 300 nonprofits that are registered as veteran service organizations. Over 300. We call it the Sea of Goodwill because you can die in that sea of goodwill because you can't find your way. You get overwhelmed. You don't know how to navigate it. And that was me. I didn't even know that they existed. So, there's a real disconnect between veterans who are getting out and veterans who are being provided programs and services on the onset.
It's interesting because in a weird sort of way, we cultivate this loneliness because we tend to pedestal society tends to pedestal veterans. And that's good for having a sense of self-worth, but self-worth isn't purpose. And so in the long term, sometimes that makes us feel more isolated. Many people are not expected to nor do they need to incorporate themselves back into society in any way. And you just don't feel useful when you're not helping the tribe. And so the thing is veteran focused mental health is just, it's different. So when you have people like us as veterans who are going through these mental health crises that sometimes stem from situations or even a loss of identity through that transition outward, what are some of the components that you think lead to a successful recovery? I mean, what is the first point of contact outside of going like, okay, obviously I need help, something's up? Like, what is the pathway forward for many people, many veterans like us that are struggling?
I think that's a great question, Joe. I think that, for every veteran, it's going to be different. But I believe that, it's communication far beyond anything else. When you open yourself up to communicating with someone that you're in pain, that you are considering suicide, that you are having a difficult time finding a reason to live, you open up a level of vulnerability that I think is very difficult to reclose. And that relationship continues at that level as long as it's needed to continue. So, I have a friend who reached out and shared that same news with me. Now our relationship's a little bit different. When I see him, I want to know how he's doing, like literally. I don't want to just be, hey, how you doing? Great. Okay. And I'm continuing my day. Now we're pulled aside for a minute. Hey, man, how are you? And obviously we're talking in between that as well. But it's made our relationship so much more special. And in that, I think you find mentors. And I think you find people who have done this before. And you start to look at people who you want to emulate. You want to be, I think everybody from boot camp looks at somebody and goes, man, I want to be like that guy. And, when you see a successful veteran out there who's struggled with his mental health, is open with their mental health, and then has success, I think it's motivating. And it's the whole reason that I've been so open about my mental health, my mental illness, is that I don't want people to feel as though they're alone like I felt I was. Now, with that being said, in my work over the last 4 or 5 months, working with specifically Native American and indigenous veterans from Alaska, Hawaii, and throughout the U.S., I've recognized that those veterans who serve at a higher rate than any other minority in the United States and provide a tremendous service to our country are not being provided the same programs and resources and avenues that we are. And nor do they have the same access to care. Reservations are set up differently. Reservations are their own nation, and they have to rely on self-sufficiency. And that is very difficult when you're dealing with SUD issues in the community, substance use disorder issues in the community, and other issues, to really be able to build an infrastructure that's going to help your population. And so figuring out ways as veterans that we can reach out to those demographics that are in a real crisis and need our help, I think that's going to be powerful. And again, we can potentially change an entire culture by providing mentors that are helping their children and helping their culture continue to live rather than die because of fentanyl. So, I just believe that for every veteran, it's a different pathway. I was working with a transgender veteran who went to a VA hospital in crisis. And the attending psychiatrist at that VA ER told her that there wasn't any place to put her, that they weren't set up to accept somebody like her. Her challenges are much different than my challenges, and I need to recognize that. We all do. And so, in her case, I didn't have the same level of empathy because I hadn't been through that. But I have had my doors closed in my face, and I have been denied programs and services. So, rather than tell her, oh, that's really horrible, we involved the LGBTQ plus advocacy center here in San Diego. We involved the VA, and eventually and ultimately we were able to have a sit down with the leadership of the VA where they were able to provide an apology and also come up with a plan so this never happened again. But that's the sort of advocacy that takes extra work. It takes extra time. But I feel as veterans, we owe it to the other veterans who are challenged in ways that we are not. I hope that answers your question, Joe.
Great answer.
So I have post-traumatic stress, and I've been through like talk therapy, group therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and prolonged exposure therapy. Prolonged exposure therapy actually set me back and put me like on suicidal ideation. But like many with post-traumatic stress, I lived through like peaks and valleys, and I recently found myself in one of those gullies due to like work stress, but also recent health changes with my traumatic brain injury. So of course, like recognizing these changes, I contacted my VA and went through a recent screening, and they recommended that I did EMDR. And I'm like, I instantly recoiled from it because I had unsuccessfully went through EMDR already when I was on active duty. And after talking to this doctor through the VA who was a practitioner of EMDR, we talked about what my experience was with this practitioner through active duty. And she's like, that's not EMDR really. So apparently I got some snake oil shit through some Air Force practitioner. And this leads me to my question for you is, how do we know and trust what we're getting is the real deal? Like, how do we, because these people were blindly giving over our trust and like our pain and our feelings. And I'm almost like, holy cow, I literally sat into this snake oil salesman's office and bled my heart out to this fool. And no wonder it didn't work. No one, and that guy ruined me for months, like, because I was like, this didn't work, and he made me feel like the asshole for it not working, and the gaslit me. So how do we know, as people who are getting the care, that they're not phoning it in?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, Stacy. I think that I don't think there's a way to specifically tell. I think, in this world where a lot of the programs and services that veterans rely on are being provided by nonprofits with very little oversight, they're able to function in a way that they see fit, but may not be the best for veterans. And, I saw this a lot in the service dog industry, which was my first attempt at getting some sort of medicine. I was given a service dog that was a formally trained personal and property protection dog and told that it was a service dog. It didn't really provide any programs or services. I had to have an e-collar on it 24 hours a day. It had to be crated when I wasn't around because it couldn't be trusted. If it saw somebody with a gun, it would start to bark and alert. Just a lot of really concerning things for somebody who was a veteran and struggling with his own PTSD and own mental health. And now he's being given a dog that is really challenging and ended up biting my daughter in the face. Now that organization claims to save 2 lives at a time. So, have they provided some great service dogs? I'm sure. But, there are organizations where the money aspect and their ability to operate, I think, and their image of what they do is not necessarily in line with the best interests of the veteran. It unfortunately, I see it a lot, especially here in San Diego, where we have a huge population of veterans and active duty service members. Every organization who thinks they've come up with a great idea to serve veterans comes to San Diego. I met a woman at a fair who, somebody told me, oh my gosh, she's doing work to help veterans with PTSDs. You should go talk to her. And so I did, and realized that this woman was from Chicago. She came here to San Diego with her book and was selling her book and telling everybody how she was helping veterans. And I asked her, how are you helping veterans? And she said, well, when there's a veteran in need, I call them every day. And I sort of sat back and I saw her big donation jar with all the money in it. And I thought to myself, gosh, that's not helping anybody. I mean, calling a veteran once a day, it sort of is like, it becomes a pain in the ass. Stop calling me. I don't want to deal with it. And it puts me further in a hole. And this was the whole service and program that she was offering these veterans. How are we supposed to refer people to her if she had 100 veterans? Is she calling 100 veterans a day? It just doesn't make sense. And so people come up with these grand ideas of how to serve veterans. They come to San Diego and then sort of find themselves lost or not finding their lane. And that's something important, I think, in the nonprofit and even in the for-profit veteran service world, is that understanding that there's different lanes and different modalities. And Stacy, to answer your question, I think it goes back to the different modalities. Programs and services offer all types of modalities for handling MST, PTSD, SUD. Some of those are warm water PTS therapy, where you lay in a warm pool of water and you go through a therapy session. Some is ecotherapy, where you work with plants and dirt, and some is equine therapy, as we all know. But my point is that I don't think one of those therapies serves the entire veteran community. You had mentioned I work at Solara Mental Health, and not as a plug, but just to kind of highlight what I think makes them so successful, is that, they've sort of married this clinical world, which needs to exist, medication management, the clinical aspect, having doctors on staff is important. But then they've also married it with this holistic approach, where they have everything from art therapy to yoga to meditation to biofeedback to EMDR to TMS it goes on and on and on. And my point being, the 25 different sort of adjunct therapies that we have are therapies that aren't going to work for every veteran, and we know that. Not every veteran is going to connect with art therapy. But if we provide enough, they're going to find something where they find their fit and they find what speaks to them. And I think that's important. The more options we're provided and stop being sold one thing that's going to be the cure-all, that gives us, sort of that drive to find that one potion that's going to make us better. I don't think that's the answer. I don't think there's one organization, and that includes the American Legion, that offers every program and service that a veteran needs. And because of that, we need to collaborate and coordinate with other nonprofits and other businesses and companies where they provide those services. So here in San Diego, District 22, we collaborate with an organization, nonprofit called Courage to Call. Courage to Call provides food for food insecurity, clothes, all the immediate needs that a veteran may have if they're homeless or if they find themselves in a real crisis. So we rely on them because we don't have a food bank. And I think that's sort of the answer, Stacy, is that we all sort of come together, collaborate together, and then have that veteran determine what's best for him or her or them.
Couldn't agree with you more, Vic. I think that we need this individualized, personalized, end-to-end holistic care to meet the veteran where they're currently at. And I think that the old models are more like, allopathic, symptom-based. I have this, I take this, I continue with my life the same way. I get better. And I think through 20 years of sustained combat, experiencing injuries like you have, like my brother has, like Joe has, like Stacy has, and so many others, and recognizing that the standards of care and the current pathways that we have, the care pathways that we have, are not working. So much so that we have 17 to 44 veterans a day for the last 20 plus years with all the work that we've all collectively been doing, right? So it's not pointing the blame at the VA or the DOD or any one large major or small nonprofit like the one my brother and I started, but we are all starting to speak the same language now. And I think that that's because of these programs that we've individually found, that we then, when something works a little bit for you, you turn around and you give a hand back to your buddy and you say, hey, this might not be the end all be all, but, for this specific thing that you're experiencing, you should experience this or have the opportunity to. And VA, DOD, like these things aren't inside the current architecture of the system. Well, let's have a conversation about that. Why is that? And what can we do to do that? And so veterans who've had these mixed experiences with these traditional therapies, like you guys kind of shared, rebuilding trust and treatment can be really, really tough. So we have to figure out how to get it right on the front end, like from transition forward, even to sustaining the force, while you're in. And we have seen that shift towards a more holistic and integrative mental health approaches we've been talking about. One that we haven't really kind of talked about, and I'd be interested to get your opinion. I don't necessarily know that you guys focus on this so much, but it's become a priority for the American Legion to win the war within. Part of that, alternative therapies, breakthrough therapies, psychedelic assisted therapies. So I don't know if you guys are aware, and underneath my name, you can see I have Texas Ibogaine, y'all. And I think what that is right now at the Texas Capitol, yesterday, there was a press conference. So when this is being recorded, it'll be March 18th, the day before. But there was a press conference, and it was former Texas Governor Rick Perry, Navy SEAL, former SEAL Team 6 operator Marcus Capone and his wife of Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. Marcus Luttrell and his wife, lone survivor. Other grant recipients from their programs that get veterans, these operators who have been pushed to the extremes of operator syndrome from what they've endured, who proportionally, are experiencing the worst of it. And then the conventional modalities not working. So the press conference is for a bill. It's Texas House Bill 3717, and it's for the establishment of a grant program to fund the U.S. FDA's drug development trials with a plant-based medicine called Ibogaine. It's for the purpose of securing the administration's approval as a medication for treatment of opioid use disorder, co-occurring substance use disorder, and any other neurological or mental health conditions. So this is a bit where it's a controlled one substance. It comes from a natural, plant, the iboga, tree out of Gabon, Africa. There's clinics that are operating outside of the U.S. right now where it's legal. These special forces veterans and other veterans in the community are going down. They're having life-saving and life-changing experiences. And they're coming back and they're saying, why is this illegal? Why can a medical professional not administer this? And it's taking literally the best of a generation of warriors to stand up and say, I experienced this and we need to have this conversation and let's lead with the science and the data. And but just to kind of bring it full circle before I get your thoughts on it, Vic, is it's not a panacea magic pill that's going to solve everybody's problem. It's one thing that is showing tremendous results for people that are addicted to opiates or have endured the worst, and it should be available in this end-to-end personalized holistic welfare system that doesn't really yet exist.
I couldn't agree more, Adam, and I'm excited to hear about that and learn about the press conference. I think holistic medication, natural medications are something that I know Solara is very interested in learning about. What's great about Solara is we only have one boss. His name is Derek, and he's the owner. And so we're able to sort of shift and focus on different avenues as needed. One of the things what we're doing, we have a Indigenous veterans program, a specific program. So one whole facility is just Indigenous veterans. And one thing that we've noticed in that culture is that their peyote ceremony is very, very important to them. Now, as a mental health, licensed facility, we can't facilitate peyote. We can't facilitate, cannabis. We can't facilitate ayahuasca. However, it's important, I think, for people to know that that exists and that, that we can even talk about it. I remember even back in the mid 90s when I was trying to get the FDA to talk about the dangers of fluoride and wanting to have doctors be able to even talk about Eastern medicine, holistic medicine, homeopathics, herbal remedies that were all not allowed, that the medical doctors were not allowed to talk to their patients about. And so, my hope is that these items, Adam, are items that can become part of the conversation as, giving the choice of that treatment to their veterans. I think that's, it's important for the veteran to be knowledgeable. I will say, when I say that, I say it a little, with a little bit of animosity, because as we inform veterans about programs and services that are available, especially from a Solara perspective, we're accused of soliciting for services. So either we get accused of soliciting for services because we're educating the veteran, or we don't educate the veteran and they never even know that the programs exist.
Well, no, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. Yeah, and it gets into the problem, and I've of course experienced this too the last 10 years working in this space of, well, it's not within the VA. It doesn't take insurance, so now you're taking advantage of the veteran. You're making them pay out of pocket, but then you go back to, but these things don't yet exist within that system that provides that for them. And so, no, it's not the thing. It's not as simple as how you're, boxing it or creating it. And also, like, we need innovative ways to fund these programs. And that's where the nonprofits, have to step up and can really, and have really filled the critical gap. And it's too much. And looking at what you guys are doing, so much of the best practices. So, like, thank you for what and how you're doing, for your story, for showing up and making it happen and coming on here to share that, because that's the only way, is when we permeate through, when we're bold enough to step up and share that on the communication platforms that we have, so that other people can learn and then start to adopt into their own practices as well. So thank you, Vic. Very much appreciate you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, Adam. And if I may say, I think when you become a veteran, you also become an advocate, and it's important to understand that you have a certain choice to make if you take on that responsibility to advocate for other veterans, and that in this time we are the ones who need to advocate for ourselves more than ever. Whether you're part of the American Legion or not, if you're a veteran, you need to advocate for other veterans. Right now, over the last year, community care at the VA has gone down 90% nationally. Well, community care was given to us under a protection called the Mission Act. And if we don't have access to community care, then that Mission Act is not being honored. We can have all the greatest programs in the world, guys, but if the VA won't send them to us, the beds are empty. Right now, I have 20 beds that are empty, and we can take immediate opening. So why is it that, the VA decides to send people to domiciliaries, which are essentially a mental institution like we had in the 30s and 40s? I mean, I talked to a therapist in Alaska who works at a vet center. He told me that he was been meeting with a veteran, and he said, Vic, that veteran doesn't have PTSD from service. That veteran has PTSD from being in the domiciliary. So, when we reduce the ability for veterans to access care, we might as well just hand tie them and put them in a corner, because, you could, like I said, Adam, you could have all the programs in the world. If somebody doesn't refer them to us, the beds stay empty.
So one of the most interesting things that I've read links mental health with chronic pain. It's one of those things that I knew, but until someone said it out loud, I never made the link. But when we attach emotions to our pain, and that's why some people who are dealing with certain things are constantly talking about it, because they're reliving through their pain what got them that pain. They're reliving that IED or that car accident or whatever it was, because they've attached these things so closely together. And so oddly, that means that treating mental health can be a super important way to improve your physical and really overall health. And so, I was wondering if you had an example of something, that corroborates that. And then my follow-up question is, are you planning on coming out to American Legion National?
I'll answer the latter first. Yes, I am. I am planning
Nice.
on coming out to National, and I'm really looking forward to it. The first question, I struggle with pain every day. I live with pain every day. And I've heard sort of the same thing, that it really can affect, muscle tension, etc. I went to a massage therapist one time, and she had to stand on my back and was trying to get these muscles to relax, and couldn't do it. And she just said, I don't know. I mean, I'm a massage therapist. I'm a sports, massage therapist. I've never seen something like this. And it really kind of made me realize that what I'm feeling on the inside does have a physical, sort of reaction. And, I don't personally have any of the science behind that. I'm sure one of our doctors at Solara certainly does, and I could certainly provide that at a later time. But I would not be surprised, at least from my personal experiences, that would be the case. I never dealt with chronic pain prior to service, and I never dealt with chronic pain, or even acute pain before service. And so I
I don't
find
think
it.
any pain's that cute.
Yeah, I like that. But I don't know how much of it is maybe medication related as well. So,
Yeah.
I've always sort of wondered that as well.
Alphas, be sure to visit solarmentalhealth.com to keep up with Vic, and we'll be sure to have that website in our show notes in case you didn't understand a word I said, or because I was on mute. We'll also have the social media handles in our show notes as well. Vic, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been very informative. Thank you. Joe, Mo or Matt.
In my
Madam?
defense, I started to call him Mr. Martin because I had just said something emotional, so I had to make a joke to hide behind, and then I just messed that up. So I don't know.
Wrong.
Professionals, right? Professionals.
Yeah,
I was told to
professionals.
remember that. I was
We're
told to
too
remember.
professional, some would say.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for visiting us today, Vic. Really appreciate you. Incredible conversation that needs to be had. And just really appreciate it for you and all the incredible work that you're doing. Keep it up. And Alpha, stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
American values and patriotism. The American Legion advocates for upholding and defending the United States Constitution, equal justice and opportunity for everyone, and discrimination against no one, youth education, responsible citizenship, and honoring military service by observing and participating in patriotic and memorial events. We are veterans strengthening America. We are the American Legion.
All right, Alphas, we hope you had a suspiciously good break, and now it's time for some scuttlebutt. Take one.
It's World Autism Awareness Month, and the reason I'm bringing that up is you may be neurodivergent and undiagnosed. In fact, my battle buddy was or is, and she didn't know it until recently. That's right, y'all. There are folks out there on the spectrum who have or who are serving right now in the military. Autism is a spectrum and not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a disease. It's a developmental disorder, or better yet, a differently wired, quotes, differently wired brain, said Army Sergeant Jennifer Sardam. She's on the spectrum. She says, quote, I served 22 years in the military, 2 combat deployments, most of them as an Army journalist. But knowing what I am now, it's much clearer to me how and why I felt I had to work so much harder to achieve the same goals as others. For me, whether I recognized it or not, it was with me all along. But, and that's my puppers in the background, but it doesn't change who I have always been, my resilience, my core values, and my work ethic. Autism is included under the umbrella that is known as neurodivergency. This refers, I can't talk today, speaking of neurodivergency, this refers to differences in the brain functioning and includes conditions such as ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, Tourette syndrome, dyspraxia, I don't know that one, and learning disorders such as dyslexia and dyscalculia. That's a new one for me as well. Individuals or groups that exhibit these variations are considered neurodivergent. Estimates between 15 and 20% of the world's population exhibit some form of neurodivergence, which is interesting. And many people with autism have comorbidities. That seems so morbid. Anything that has comorbid in it seems morbid to me. I don't know. That word is weird for me. So the same sergeant who was talking about neurodivergence, the gal who's basically wrote this article that I'm referencing, says she has Tourette syndrome as well as ADHD and alongside PTSD from multiple deployments. She was also screened for dyspraxia and verbal learning disorders. Anyway, she talks about having clumsiness and motor dysfunction as well. Anyway, it's really, really interesting. Challenges in managing autism in the workplace, such as social anxieties and hypertension, may also be something people should be looking out for if they're thinking that they may have it. Jennifer goes on to say and share that she, quote, believes, I believe my skills in writing and editing are partially fueled by being on the spectrum. So that's pretty interesting. In the private sector has begun to catch on to the potential benefits of neurodiversity to the entire workforce. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency launched its neurodiversity pilot in 2020 with a focus on hiring autistic individuals. It took a long pause to thoroughly evaluate the results of the program and now plans to build on these efforts later being Now, recognizing and accepting the potential of the rich tapestry of the nuances to be found within the neurodivergent community can only strengthen their relationships in the workplace, as well as the VA mission, adding to better understanding of care to provide veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. If any part of the neurodivergent experience sounds familiar to you, dear Alphas, there's an Autistic Veterans Facebook group. We'll put those in our show notes, but you can also go ahead and simply type Autistic Veterans in your Facebook search engine and it should pop up. There's really only one group, so it makes it pretty easy. Don't forget, Alphas, embrace the weird, celebrate the unique, and let's all be neuro awesome. The world needs all kinds of minds, not just one.
Unless it's mine. No.
Embrace the weird.
That's a bad idea.
Riders on the Storm. American Legion riders from American Legion Post 9 in Jacksonville, Florida, will be hosting their annual Boots on the Ground poker run in May, and they are planning for a massive run, Whirly Joe. The riders originally launched the poker run to raise funds for a memorial and a nonprofit organization created in honor of their post namesake, Specialist Kelly J. Mixon, who was killed while serving in Afghanistan in 2010. 88 motorcycles and 123 total participants took part in the inaugural ride, which consisted of one route and 5 poker stops. And it's only grown since. The second year saw more than 500 motorcycles participate, while last year's ride had 1,000 and raised more than 130,000 for various veteran charities. That is outstanding. This year's Boots on the Ground poker run will take place May 10th. Post 9 is hosting, along with Dick's Wings and Flamingo Lake RV, where the ride begins and ends. There are 15 different routes and 44 stops on the ride. But the event goes far beyond just a charity motorcycle run. The day's events include a Jeep party. More than 300 took part in 2024. A parade, raffles, live music, vendors, family activities, and SpaceX astronauts. No, I'm just kidding on the last one. Flamingo Lake RV will be the site of the 2025 Boots on the Ground Memorial, which consists of U.S. flags placed among more than 3,000 combat boots. Each boot has a picture attached to it of a U.S. service member killed in action after September 11, 2001. It's important to remember the sacrifice of the people who have died for this country, said first-term American Legion Riders Chapter 9 Director Chris Pomeroy. If you look at those boots, each one of them has a picture of a fallen veteran that's died post 9/11. It's important to remember and to pay tribute to their ultimate sacrifice. That's really what Boots is about. It's very humbling. This year, the ride and associated events will fundraise for 5 specific causes: the Florida American Legion Project, Vet Relief, Canines for Warriors, Canine Line, and Operation New Uniform and Wreaths Across America. If you look at a lot of the programs we support, said Pomeroy, those organizations really try to help out with veterans and their PTSD or just their mental health. And through the years, the mission of the Boots on the Ground poker run has remained the same: to always honor our veterans living, support their families, and honor those who have gone before us. Pika said, Jacksonville is a military town. When you're supporting veterans, the military, and their families, you're going to get a lot of people to come out and support. That is a massive poker run, probably not many bigger in the country. Definitely putting something special in the water down there. Congratulations. Good luck on this year's. I don't know that you can beat the numbers from last year, and I don't necessarily know that that's what they're trying for. But yeah, if you're in the tri-state area, that's Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Joe, go ahead and check it out because it should be a good event. We'll have the link to that in our show notes.
Kind of interested. I'm kind of interested in Richard's Wings.
When you said Flamingo Lake RV, where the ride begins and ends, I thought that was like their tagline for a second. I was like, man, they snuck in a little tagline for us that time. That's funny.
That
but
goes
that's
on all
actually where the
that's
ride begins and ends.
That's on all the merch.
Yeah, where the ride begins and ends. But I personally work for America's Vet Dogs, but I've heard really good things about Canines for Warriors. And I actually went to a Wreaths Across America event as a they asked me to hang the wreath for the Navy last year, which was a really beautiful event. I didn't know anything about it until I was asked. And sometimes as a veteran, you get sort of pulled into things just because you're a veteran, not because of anything else. And you show up and you realize, wow, this thing that they're doing, like, it means a lot to a lot of people. And you didn't know until you were a part of this ceremony. I was very impressed with the honor that they showed the services at that event. That was really cool. But,
All right, Joe, what do you got for us?
Well, I was going to try and come up with cool new nicknames for us, like me, like King Joe, and then, Peasant Adam, or, like, I don't know, just random stuff like that. And, but I would think about name.
No real thought behind it.
No, I mean, just totally just off the top of the dome there. But, on TV and in movies, military nicknames are always, like, really cool, like Maverick or Iceman.
Those are call signs.
Well, yeah, but a lot of times those are kind of earned,
What was your call sign, Adam?
Ours are just based off, the units that we're in, so we don't.
Oh yeah,
that's boring.
But
I had a very temporary.
Hey, let me share my call sign, Joe.
Oh gosh, jeez.
No, I mean it was my favorite call. I mean, it's when I was company commander, so it was Ghost Rider 6.
Ooh, oh, that is kind of spiffy.
Yeah, it's all fun and games, so your head catches on fire.
Yeah, that's it. I was a Ghost Rider in my
platoon. There's 2 O's in Ghost.
I was a devil, and I was like, these are very dark.
Yeah.
Thematically, I need a little bit of light and love in here, baby.
It kind of goes with your hair, though. You are
a ghost,
light-haired ghost,
white-haired. Oh,
ghostly.
I had a very temporary cool nickname that didn't stick because I didn't know how to carry it over anywhere. Like, you can't give yourself your own nickname, but I was with 3-1 and we did this training thing, and I forget what it was, but somebody shot, like, we went around the corner and somebody, fired, like, it was like, I don't know if it was paintball or if they had nothing, but it was basically went around the corner and I just did like a Neo thing and sort of backed up, and they called me Neo for a little while. And then somehow that turned into Boot Dock Saint, because I was a new corpsman. And so I was the Boot Dock Saint. And then I got moved from.
What does Boot Dock Saint have to do with the Matrix?
Nothing at all. That's why I'm saying it was weird that it turned into that. Well, because in the Boondock Saints, the movie where it's like the Irish people, and then they end up like,
that was a good one.
You're going crazy shooting guns all over the place. I don't know where the link was. It was one of those dumb conversations, but I immediately got moved over to 2-1, and then I was just Doc. Never really got a nickname after that. But I was, I earned the love I got. I just didn't get much of a nickname out of it.
Nice.
But
Stacey,
there have been some pretty famous nicknames, like Jim Chaos Mattis, General. We got to throw a general in front of there if you don't know who Mattis is for some reason. Many know the retired Marine Corps General Jim Mattis is Mad Dog, but that nickname was foisted upon him by the press, and he doesn't like it. His nickname among his men was his call sign, which was Chaos. So, or General George Old Blood and Guts Patton Jr. Okay, now when you've got a 4-word nickname, that's got to be the best. I thought Boot Dock Saint sounded cool, but Old Blood and Guts.
That's rough.
O-Bag. Patton Jr., America's first and possibly greatest tank officer, promised his junior leaders that World War II would be full of grisly horror. He told them, "You'll be up to your neck in blood and guts." And the men decided that was the perfect nickname for him. But we all know that in reality, nicknames we give are given in the military, usually born of our less than heroic moments. I stumbled across an old BuzzFeed article about veterans sharing their hilarious nicknames, most of which came from disastrous moments. Here's an example. So Hook FEO3 posted, "My buddy's name was Spoon because he wasn't as sharp as a knife, but he was in the drawer.
Wow.
Love that one.
Spork.
That's the old
spork.
Chinook engineer is what a hook FE is.
Oh, yeah.
Shit hook.
Shit.
That's it.
Foul _ Dwimmer, Laik, Dwimmer Lake,
I think
posted,
so.
I know a guy whose nickname in the military was the Bear. Sounds imposing, right? Turns out his squad called him that because he'd get up in the night for snacks or foraging for food. I got a good friend of mine whose name is Big Snacks because he would go to Costco. He worked in a he worked in a fire department, and he would show up with these Costco bags of snacks, these big boxes of snacks, and nobody ever ate them but him. But he kept showing up, and he was using them as an excuse to buy all these Costco snacks. Big Snacks, I love you, man. So Light Tank Terror posted, from the male pilots I knew, there was a shack. That's SHACK, not to drop live bombs on base and killed an electrical shack. Stuka, so shack had to drop live bombs on a base and killed an electrical shack. Stuka did a training mission with his landing gear out, going 400 KTS. And Mobile, last name was Holmes.
HOLMES, Holmes, as in Sherlock Holmes. Mobile. That's pretty freaking clever. Mobile Homes.
That's good. I think it's funny because I feel like it would have went the next level, and he would have just been called Trailer Park, and nobody would have figured out where that name came from. Because sometimes there's like layers to it. Undead Undergarments. So Undead Undergarments, shout out to you, proves that the same holds true for members of the military in other countries. My mate was in the RAF. His nickname was Fireball. Badass, right? Wrong.
Yeah.
He learned once over an exhaust vent while working on a plane. He once leaned over an exhaust vent while working on a plane and scorched his right testicle.
Ooh, Larry?
Followed by a shriek and him having to stand on tippy toes over a sink to splash cold water on his nards. After that, when he entered a room, a squadron would sing Great Balls of Fire.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Anytime Jerry Lewis gets involved in your call sign, you've got a good one.
And hats off to you, Undead Undergarments, for working in nards into a sentence.
Nards is a good word. Nards is a good word. So how about it? Either you guys, we touched upon you guys' nicknames, but did you know of anybody else with a moniker born of mishap?
Many.
None of them.
I know one thing that we did is somebody lost inter-squad radio, and I won't say who it was because I'm pretty sure that was vaguely illegal. But we wrote up an entire award ceremony, and we called it the Order of the Crescent Moon, and we gave them an enemy award, and we signed it at the bottom. We signed Saddam Hussein, who was already dead and gone by this point, but we signed it out like they had gotten an award for donating their ISR to the enemy, or to the fake us.
Nice. I had a lot of nicknames over the years, but yeah, none that's probably appropriate to name on this podcast.
But names have meaning and they have power, and I think that it's one of those things that in the military, there is an air of harsh love. And we say things to each other, and you hear veterans sitting around talking, and it sounds like they just don't like each other at all. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because they love each other.
And I think sarcasm is a love language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know call signs in the strike fighter community are they're different than nicknames, but they kind of originate around from the same way. And it's basically the dumbest thing that you do that can be attributed in some way. So part of it is, kind of the sarcastic, making fun of, but the other part of it is a sense of humility, in the cockpit, to be you may be a strike fighter pilot, you may be, flying one of the baddest machines on the planet, but don't forget that you're also very dumb sometimes, and it's you have to have that balance because you can't outfly your capability set. So I like that and appreciate that. I don't think they're normally meant to like destroy somebody. It's normally, where's the good humor in it? How can we laugh? And yeah, I mean, probably some people have some significant emotional trauma from their
Mhm. I will take a
nickname.
moment to dime my husband out, who was in the same unit, and he had a way of just like deflating a room when he walked into it. His name is Dunaway. His last name is Dunaway, and everybody called him Funaway because everybody could be like cutting up and having a great time, and the minute he walked into a room, it was like a record player scratching. It was like and just it was like,
He's awesome, though. You'll have to tell me the story behind that one later.
it's like a somebody ripping a silent but deadly fart. It's just like, jeez,
Funaways.
just
That's
taking the
wild.
air out of the room. Well, I don't know. I think I have the great joy of knowing how wonderful he is outside of the military experience. But Jesus, when we were in the military together, he just was all business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bless his heart. Fun
Well,
line.
it takes you 20 years whether you're having fun or not. So you might as well have fun. Of course, that's Joe's motto, and my motto's usually hard-earned. But Alphas, we love you. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. And we'll see you next week.